Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. Hades 2 has started racking up playtime on my Steam page, and I'm not the only one out there. People have been waiting to travel with Melinoë, fighting through an underworld taken over by the Titan of Time, Chronos, to save her family from his cruel reign. And while we're still waiting for the full release, the early access has more than enough to chew on until the game is complete. And while Nova reviews Hades 2 early access as a video that tickles my brain in a very specific way, this is a Yu-Gi-Oh channel. So if I'm gonna spend around 15 minutes gushing over my new obsession, I've gotta find a way to tie the two together. And I think I found just the thing. An obscure little format known as domain format. I'll get a link up in the top right for you so you can learn what exactly domain format is and how it works. And the thing I like about the commander format is that you can make decks based on characters that you love from outside that game. At least until your property of choice has been chosen by the Universes Beyond the team, in which case they handle that for you. Having such a wide variety of cards to fill out a singleton list gives you the opportunity to dig deep into the card pool so you can really express every little aspect of the story, characters, and lore that you want. So today, I'm gonna walk you through the deck list that I chose to make that lets you play as Melinoë, Princess of the Underworld, Aspect of Nightmares, and main character of Hades 2 in domain format. Let's get started. So the first step in our process is, of course, choosing our commander. Ideally, this is going to represent our main character, since the whole point is that we're trying to play as them. So we have to pick just the right monster for the job. And that process begins by going over Melinoë's characteristics to find what fits her best. She's a proficient spellcaster with all the incantations that she's casting, but she's no stranger to melee combat. So we want a spellcaster type monster, but one that looks like they could physically kick your ass. Dark attribute is also a plus, since she is following the will of night. And I can't think of a better monster to fit that bill than Diabellstar, the Black Witch. She's got magic powers and an arsenal of magical weapons at her disposal. It's honestly a match made in hell. And on top of being very flavorful, she actually makes for an excellent commander, because she has her own inherent summoning condition that she can use to leap right out of the command zone at a moment's notice. And if she gets sent to the grave during your opponent's turn, which there are going to be a lot more of them now that you have 3 other players to contend with, you can bring her back to the field with her own effect, kind of like Melinoë getting punked by something random in Oceanus by getting right back up with her pseudo-immortality. As for the Sinful Spoils cards we'll be searching with Diabellstar, we're going to be getting Urciela, Silvera, Subversion, Whispers, and Morion. We can even play Wanted, Seeker of Sinful Spoils, because we can play Snake Eye Diabellstar, and it's worth it to have a card you can use to recycle and draw 1. And in the lore of the deck, we can think of all of these as the Nocturnal Arms, with Snake Eye's Diabellstar acting as our animal companion. I mean, if we can't play Poplar, we might as well play Gigantic Poplar. Next, we have to fill out the rest of our deck, so we're going to be looking for spellcasters and dark attribute monsters, and we're going to start by adding in the Whitewoods cards. Asteria plays the role of Mini Melinoë, and while there isn't a way to run Diabells, sadly she is a light illusion monster, and there isn't really a fitting commander that has light or illusion in it, so we gotta skip it. But we do get her kid form, Reset, giving us some way to add Nemesis to our lineup. Meanwhile, Urcia can be our Hecate, largely because of the big witch hat, while Silva can fill the role of another animal companion because of all the wolves. The light attribute does clash a bit with our dark theming, but even at night, the Servants of the Moon have a light to guide themselves by. Heck, we may even be able to say that Silva is Artemis if we want to stretch our definitions a bit. We'll also be using all of the Whitewoods spells and trap cards, Beware, Legend, and Woes, because even though we can't use the illusion half, the spellcaster half will be pretty good for us. Now, what about the rest of our Crossroads cast? As Doom Incarnate, we can represent Moros with Doom Caliber Knight, which can doom our opponent's monsters to the grave, though it's not always on our side. Odysseus threw me off for a bit. At first, I thought Dark General Freed would be the perfect fit for its big strategist vibes, and being able to determine your draw every turn is pretty on theme, and has a lot of utility in a singleton deck. But only working on level 4 dark monsters limits our options, especially because we just added a bunch of light ones. On top of being a monster that needs a tribute summon. It's gonna bite to give up the spell protection it provides, but instead, we're gonna go with Armageddon Knight. It can still mechanically set up our plays by throwing monsters into the grave from our deck, which once again is a huge consistency booster in a deck where you can only run a single copy of each card. And it's still them commanding an army of the dead, so filling up the grave lines up pretty well there. This means we can also play reinforcement of the army to tutor it out, and since we have an undead army to account for, this gives us a great excuse to play the best Phantom Knight cards we can get our hands on to represent our good shades. This means we can play the Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak, Ragged Gloves, Silent Boots, Stained Greaves, Torn Scales, Breaksword, and Rusty Bardiche, as well as the Phantom Knight's Sword, Fogblade, and Wing as trap cards. I'll leave you to decide which of these represents Dora, if any at all. She's really not much of a fighter, though I think Rusty Bardiche is unequivocally Skelemius. I'd love to give a card to Skelly, but he's absent from the game. I kinda wish they'd brought him back. We could also include Raider's Knight and the Rank Up Magic's Force and Launch from the Phantom Knight pool to access the Xyz Dragons or Raid Raptor extra deck monsters, but I'm having a hard time justifying adding any of those cards, at least within the world of the game, since we don't really have any Dragonic or Avian allies that we can call upon. Oh, funny little lore inclusion, let's put in all the Chthonic cards, since we play and are aligned with many of the Chthonic gods. Chthonian Blast is more removal and damage, Chthonian Polymer can be a big punish against any opposing fusion decks, and Chthonian Soldier is not only an Amazona Swordmaster, it lines up with our Legions of the Dead theming. Sadly, we're not able to add Chthonian Emperor Dragons since Fire Dragons are neither Dark nor Spellcasters, and Chthonian Alliance isn't going to work too well in a singleton format. Let's pivot over to some Spellcasters now. We have some really good options I want to go over. First up, the Prophecies. Each one is based off of a major arcana, which ties into the very tarot-coded cards in Hades 2 that unlock our bonuses. Not all of them are super useful, but Spellbook Magician of Prophecy can search any spellbook card, Temperance summons out a big spellcaster, and Justice searches you out more cards. Maybe even add a little Reaper of Prophecy to add a little bit of that death flavoring. True, we don't have Thanatos in the game yet, but his presence will still be missed. He's left behind a lot of siblings after all. As for spellbooks, we can use Secrets to search out any other spellbook, Knowledge for some draw power, Master to double up on our spellbook effects, Power for a little boost in attack, Crescent Library for more searches, Life for more revival, and the Grand Spellbook Tower, giving us a way to recycle our spellbooks while drawing us cards. For the extra deck, we can also add in Crowley, the First Prophecyr. Turning any two spellcaster monsters into a free spellbook card helps us access that part of our deck, and a free normal summon of a high-leveled spellcaster can come in clutch, especially with some of the cards we'll be talking about later. Lastly, since room is starting to get tight, the Witchcrafters also feel like a very appropriate theme to include. They're witches, the game has a lot of crafting in it, it all kind of works out. And some of their effects even work with spellcasters in general, so that's a nice bit of synergy. We'll want to play Genie, Pottery, Pittori, and Schmitta, primarily since they tag out into other Witchcrafters to help you get the right one for the job. Adele can outmobilize our spellcasters, both from the hand and from the grave. Hain is removal. Aruru is one of the most roundabout hand traps in existence, and Madame Vare provides great effect negation while getting very big. It even comes with a fusion monster, Vice Madame, which gets you a ton of value the more spells and spellcaster effects you can trigger. We'll also want to run a lot of their spell and trap cards for the radical value that they provide. Collaboration gets you a double attacker. Confusion Confession is the fusion spell we'll likely be using to make Vice Madame. Creation is our search card, and Holiday is for revival. Scroll here also makes the cut as the only continuous Witchcrafter spell representative. By Street helps protect Witchcrafters, but Witchcrafters only. Scroll gives us a draw if any spellcaster monster destroys another in battle. Patronus is, in general, a great way to recycle your monsters while grabbing you your Witchcrafter spells. It even has a grave effect that's famous for being a rotten little combo with the following card, Spell Chronicle, which, as a big scroll that comes attached with a very big challenge, kinda acts as our Testament of Night. It does require us to dump our entire hand to use it, but if we have Patronus in our graveyard, we can use Spell Chronicle to banish 5 Witchcrafter spells from our deck, then immediately banish Patronus from our grave to add them to our hand. This leaves us with only a few slots that we can use to add in some tech cards, which is perfect because I have just the things. We're going to need some ways to dig through our deck to help get to the pieces that we need, and since this format doesn't have a ban list, we can play Pot of Greed, which is more than just a power pick here, it actually fits into the story. I mean, there's plenty of pots and vases on the way down to Tartarus that we can smash open for some goodies, and this amphora is just one such unfortunate piece of pottery along the way. And after that, we have Graceful Charity, which stands in for our godly boons. You get your choice of 3, as reflected in the 3 draws, but then you have to give up 2 of them, like the 2 discards. It also kind of lines up with the fact that many of our boons come with some kind of downside or sacrifice that you have to account for. In fact, you could say it's a bit of a painful choice, which you can also play to fill up your graveyard while grabbing you a free card. To accentuate all the underworld shenanigans, a copy of Foolish Burial for all of our ghoulish creatures is called for so we can set up our grave effects, and Foolish Burial Goods is here to get Patronus into the grave faster, as well as any Witchcrafter spells we want to set up in the graveyard that we can have bounce back to our hand once we get a Witchcrafter stuck on the board. And what would a good Hades run be without some Death Defiances? We'll let Monster Reborn handle that for us, which has the upside of letting us play some of our opponent's cards if it'll suit our purposes, which then pivots over as a reference to recruiting those shades. The last thing we absolutely have to take care of is the extra deck, because despite everything, we haven't really expanded much on it, but thankfully, we are not short on options. Right off the bat, we can include the 6 Charmer Link monsters, since we have spellcasters across the entire spectrum of attributes thanks to the Witchcrafters. And while they have a lot of witchy vibes to them, they even have their own familiars, it's also reminiscent of the new Elemental Affinities mechanic, where boons are often associated with one of many elements that factor into other effects. Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians, is a great Link monster that can help revive our spellcaster monsters. And with 3 opponents, there will be plenty of graveyards with lots of spells in them to generate a ton of counters to get a lot of revivals. It also helps that Selene is actually in the game. Artemis even has her own card in the form of the Magistus Moon Maiden, but because we didn't include any Magistus monsters or Alistair the Invoker as part of our list, it doesn't really accomplish much on its own, so we've skipped over that. But if you squint a bit, Summon Sorceress can be a stand-in for the Dark Witch Medea, helping Melinoë with powerful incantations of her own. Remember, we get to use banned cards, so nothing's stopping us from using this to help get as many spellcasters from our deck as possible. Granted, the effect will be negated, so make sure you use it as material for something instead of banking on its effect to save you. And lastly, Chaos Angel is too great to pass up, not only because it has a bonkers suite of effects, but also because Chaos is a character in the game. Now, since we only have so many spaces, there are some cards that didn't quite make the cut, but could be swapped in if you were so inclined. Tempest Magician is an alternative to Medea if you want to embrace our Synchro side, while giving us a way to burn someone out of the game out of nowhere. Guardian Chimera can actually be made via Confusion Confession because it's a fusion spell that can fuse for anything as long as a Witchcrafter monster is involved, which can be our good boy Cerberus, though we don't actually get to align with him in the game. There's also Time Thief Redoer, which would give us something to do with the Phantom Knights that we summon off of Breaksword's destruction effect. This gives us a little Chrono crust to reference our good friend Chronos, and is a pretty sweet card to boot in its own right. Now, if you want to lose friends, we haven't found a card that represents the Crossroads yet, and once again, the perfect card exists for this in the form of Secret Village of the Spellcasters. It's a village, it's secret, it's full of spellcasters. What could go wrong? Especially because you have a spellcaster that lives in your command zone. Heck, you could even play Terraforming to search this card out to give you essentially 2 copies of it in your singleton deck. And if you want to do another squinting session, you could justify the Terraforming inclusion as the process of building out the Crossroads camp. But remember, this is only if you want to sit across from 3 very angry people that will begin to focus fire you out of the game. Another series of cards I wasn't able to fit in was a way to make Nemesis a more prominent role in the deck. You run across her not only in the Crossroads, but as you descend into Tartarus looking to kill Chronos. So it's a big shame that we don't have a card that more specifically encapsulate her, but we do have a way to accomplish this via the Evil Eye archetype, as the Evil Eye is the keepsake that you get from Nemesis by giving her a nectar. And get this, they revolve around the equip spell card Evil Eye of Selene. So if you don't feel like Witchcrafters are attached enough to the theme, you can take all of them out, plus the Spell Chronicles, because it was only going to work with Witchcrafters, as well as Summon Sorceress from the extra deck, and replace them with all the main deck Evil Eyes, except for Mesmerism and Defeat, as those are the 2 worst ones, and include Gorgon and Zirziel into the extra deck. Now that we've covered all the card choices, let's go over how they work together. It's all well and good that we've got the theming down, but can you actually play this as a real deck? And the answer is a resounding yes. If you send any of the white wood spell and trap cards to the grave to summon Diabellstar, or send them to the grave for a Witchcrafter, you just get to put him back on the field for free. And in a similar vein, you can also recycle the Witchcrafter spells during an end phase where you have a Witchcrafter monster on board, provided you haven't actually activated that Witchcrafter spell that turn. And all the Phantom Knights have great effects they can utilize once they hit the graveyard, making them perfect fodder for Diabellstar. The spellbook cards in general work with spellcasters, so if you have no prophecies but you have Spellbook of Power, you can still turn any of your spellcasters into a Juggernaut by gifting them 1,000 attack. But the prophecy monsters themselves very specifically only work with the spellbook, so that's probably the only big issue here. If we run into any hands where we draw a big spellcaster monster and no way to get it onto the board, we have an answer sitting in our command zone. Just pitch that monster to summon Diabellstar and set Whispers of the Sinful Spoils. Then, on a following turn, you flip up Whispers, put Diabell back into your hand, and then summon the monster you pitched. Which means that little gremlin Madame Vare is always ready to drop by at a moment's notice to cause some mischief. And then, because you put Diabell back into your hand instead of the command zone, you can summon it again without incurring the life point penalty. And that about does it for the deck profile. Hades 2 is a really special game, and I hope that, if you like that game, you might find some fun with this deck idea. And if you haven't been playing Hades, then I hope that you saw something that encouraged you to pick up either of the games. Down below you can find the deck list from this video, cause I like ya, and a link to the domain format Discord, because this list isn't gonna do you much good without anyone to play it with. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I've got a small favor to ask. If you could leave a like and comment down below about your thoughts on the video, any cards you feel would have made a better fit, other characters you'd like to see have decks made from them, all that good stuff. And if you want to be really cool, share this around with somebody you know who either plays Yu-Gi-Oh!, Hades, or both to help get the word out. While I would love to leave this video in the hands of the almighty algorithm, and I mean I'm making a video about Hades 2 around the time that it's most popular, I'm doing my best to ride those waves after all, it's totally possible that word of mouth can also help to boost viewership, so if you have the time or the ability, sharing this around to a friend, streamer, or anyone else that you know that's watching videos really makes a huge impact. This is a new series of videos I would like to make, but as this is my full-time job, I can only really dedicate my time towards works that keep the lights on. So if you want to help with that directly, YouTube memberships and Patreon pledges go a long way towards helping with that. In fact, I think it's about time to roll those patron credits. This has been GoldenNova signing off with a big ol' stopped. Death to Chronos. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the lovely people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, the Critic of Innocence and Upstairs Media, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Owexa Toehime, Anansi Dragon, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Emony Chan, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Groog, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Megacombi, Melinoë Asta, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Scott 48, Serenity Towns, Skybuster Leo, That One Dumbass, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beelzephyr, Baron Von Titty Sprinkles, Beluga Master, Bernag, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper, R.I.P., Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Fabrizio Orpianesi, Hike Boyajian, Herbal D, Ignis Heath the true Draco Slayer, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lobomaru02, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Nitromo, Obsidian, Ramen Resurrect-chan, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, Terror Top to 3, Tiger X2476, The Pokemon 52, The Legendary Raven, and Zaldreka, as well as all the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you checked out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see how many of the themes featured in this video work on their own, check out this playlist of videos I've made covering those archetypes. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.